everyone, welcome to this Graitec webinar on how to use and create custom connections in advanced steel. My name's Alec Giles, most of you know me, I'm a structures consultant in Graitec. So this webinar is part of a series of webinars. You recently missed one, or perhaps you saw it, but the last few days there's been one on timber and advanced steel. Earlier today I did one on using concrete railings and stairs in advanced steel. This is the custom connections, and then we have ones coming up soon for Revit and Plant 3D in relation to advanced steel. You'll get a handout for this at the end of the webinar. In fact, if you look at your GoToWebinar panel, then you'll be able to see there that you have webinars, 3 handouts on your GoToWebinar panel. If you try and download those now, save time at the end of the webinar, make sure you don't miss anything. So 3 handouts there for you to find and download. Then you can follow the links to those other webinars. For this particular webinar, this is what I'm going to show you. So it's all about creating and using custom connections. So I'm going to create 3 realistic joints, as you can see in the pictures there. We're going to show you how to create a custom connection. And that means once it's a custom connection, you can place it similar to the connection vault, where it's just pick the beams and the rest of the joint appears. How to use building bricks to add intelligence to your custom connections so it can adapt to a range of situations, a little bit like the main connections can. How you can make your custom connections available for any project. How to insert and use your custom connections in future projects, and how to adjust the custom connection after you've inserted it. So the whole range of how these operate. If you've got any questions, again, look at your GoToWebinar panel and you'll be able to see there's a questions box there. You can type your question in there and I'll go through any I find at the end. So let's get into advanced steel. Here we go. You don't want to watch me draw simple beams. You're all capable of that, so there's nothing new to learn there on this occasion. So what I'm going to look at is some examples of joints you might want to do. We have here a part of a building or a portal frame, and it's got a hip rafter. So there's many different ways you could connect the hip rafter to the supporting beams. Quite often I've seen it where you have a secondary beam across the angle and then this joins into that. That's the arrangement I'm going to make today. So first of all, I need to create the joint manually using all the normal tools you would use in advanced steel. So I need to draw that cross beam in. That's going to be a channel. So from the end of there, ortho 500. Check the properties. It needs to be a 230 by 90 on the toe. There you go. Now I can select that beam, move that end across 500. Right, so that just misses the column. And it's got the cross beam in. Now that's not going to sit there by itself. We need to put some connections or joints on there. The custom connections can include an entire connection from the connection vault. So if you often use combinations together, again, they can be built into a custom connection. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to platform beams, and I'm going to join this channel to the main beam using a toe plate. So it's that beam and that beam. Let's go in and sort that out. So that I can see around it a bit easier, I'm going to change to the X-ray visual style. And I can see the bolts and everything else down through there. So let's get some decent settings in here. Okay, I'm going to go for that. It needs to be, I don't want the plates quite so wide. That looks sensible now. Match the width of the channel roughly. The bolts I think are a bit too crammed in there. I don't need that many. So let's go. 2 bolts. 80, 70. That looks reasonable for the sake of our purposes today. I'll tell you what, let's turn off the stiffeners. I don't really want the stiffeners in there. So that's fine. I can use joint copy to put the same on the other end of that channel. That'll do nicely. Let's go back to realistic. Okay, so I'm going to use ordinary end plate connection on here. You'll use these every day. Let's just put something decent in here. I think I will have 3 lines this time. Again, for our purposes today, that looks quite reasonable. So that'll do. So all of that now, the joints, the extra beam, and so on, I want to make that really easy to place so that I can place it in just a few clicks in future. So what I do, having created the manual connection, I'll come down to the palette. The third page on the palette is custom connections. And at the top, you've got these 2 icons. You've got create or insert a custom connection template. So the first thing we have to do is create it. So I'll go to create. And how many beams are involved? Well, 3 beams are involved in this joint. They'll be the existing beams. So be careful what order you pick this in. You have to do this every time. So I'm going to go right, accept, left, accept, and then the hip, accept. Right, we've got the little dialog box now. We can give this a joint a name. So hip bottom, that'll do. Put in prompts for the beams. So it tells you which one you're talking about. It turned red. When you come to place this, it will say, please select blank. And the blank will be whatever you've written in here. So right tie beam, left tie beam, and hip rafter. Okay, can't do anything with it yet because I haven't chosen any pieces to go in that joint yet. So I use this button here to select the pieces that belongs to the joint. I want to select everything except the actual beams themselves. So I'm going to put a window around everything there to make sure I catch it all. And accept. And you see you now get this blue box around the whole lot. The blue box is the custom connection joint box. So I can close that. And just to give you a sneak peek of what we're up to next, when we've created a custom connection, you can then insert it using the insert connection template. Pick that off of your list. Okay, and you go 1, 2, 3, bingo, there's your joint. Exactly as I got it. So we'll show you a bit more of that in a few minutes. But that's how easy they are to place once you've created them. So I'm going to come down now to this just 2 bits of RHS. And I've made up a joint in my head that I think would be nice to join these together, basically with some plates to slot between. So I'm going to start off doing that. But this time, instead of using existing joints, there's no existing joints that are going to help me. But of course, I want this joint to be able to work on any size of RHS, whether it's 100 by 50, 300 by 200, or whatever. I want it to work, and I want the plates to be spaced out correctly, touching either side. If I just drew plates on here using the various plate commands, then everything in the connection would be based on the intersection point of the 2 beams. So that would be where the 2 system lines are intersecting inside here. They would have a fixed offset from that point, 50mm offset, be the same size every time. That won't give me any adjustment. So to make it adjust really well, if you look at the custom connection page, all these other icons on this page are what we call building bricks. And each one of them will create basically what we could consider a micro joint, a tiny little joint that just creates one plate or one group of bolts in an intelligent fashion. So the placement of it is driven intelligently. I have another file open here where I've given the models of these, what these each do. So for example, you can have a plate along the flange and it automatically chooses the flange, certain offsets from the end, and you can have it positioned. The width and the length of, the width of the plate will adjust according to the beam. And same with these other various configurations, the plate sizes adjust according to the beam it's on. You also have ones for placing patterns of bolts or shear studs. And you might notice here you can even do staggered patterns of bolts, or staggered pattern there, putting bolts or anchors on a plate, shear studs, galvanizing holes. You can put other plates onto plates if you need a plate around the edge, or you want to put packer plates or shim plates, spacer plates. They're really good. They're the finger shims underneath the bolts. Let me show you one of those. That kind of shape. Automatically adjusts the bolts. If the bolts change spacing, the plate would adapt immediately. Stiffeners here, and various objects on the beams. One of the handouts, don't forget to download the handouts, is a copy of these on a PDF, so you can have a look and see what these mean, because the names are a little bit confusing. Might take you a bit of experimenting to get used to that. So go back to our model, and I'm going to use these to connect it and create it. The first thing is this beam is going into that one. So I need to cut it back, and I need to cut it back in an intelligent fashion, not a fixed distance. So I'm sure you all know the intelligent cut back would be cut at object. So I'll start with that, cut to that, trim the tube there. I'm going to put a 2mm gap in there just so we've got a little bit of play, because that would be sensible. Right, now we need to create the rest of the joint. I want to put some plates on here, a plate either side of the beam. So that would be this one on the pilot, plate along beam web. So if I choose that and choose the beam roughly near one end, do I need a reference point? Not on this occasion. Some plate has appeared. I want that plate on both sides. So there it is, both sides. I want it based on the end of the physical beam, but I need this plate to touch the main tube. So I'm going to give it an offset of -2 so that it moves up, because I've put the 2mm gap in there. I need to put it back again. And then for the size of the plate, I'm happy with the length of 200, but I'm going to make the height based on projections, and look, it adjusted to the plate. But I'm going to make that projection 10mm top and bottom, so it's actually 10mm inboard of the beam size. So it hasn't done miracles for us, but what it has done is create that plate, automatically got the spacing between the two plates, it's automatically controlling the height of the plates, and it's putting it on the end of the beam. So however much the beam's been cut off, this will always be perfectly on the end of it. So that's the kind of intelligence we've got there, and that's much more than you would get from an ordinary plate on its own. I want to stiffen these plates onto that, and strengthen that. So we have another building brick here called outside stiffener. Choose that and choose the members for the plates to touch. There's my stiffener. Give it a size. Something like that. And again on the other side. Okay. I want to put a cut across the corner of those to make them triangular. So I'm going to use the ordinary corner cut. 60, that's come out right first time, must be from when I practiced. That's lovely. And I'll do the same on this one over that side. And then I need to do this one at the bottom. For some reason they have to swap it around when these go from top to bottom. Like so. And then the same on that one. Okay, got the 4 chamfers in there. Need to bolt these 3 items together now. So I'll go back to my building rigs. I don't just want the bolts to be anywhere. I want the bolts to stay the right length, but also if this plate changes length, I want it to stay in the middle of the overlapping area of the 2 items. So I could just do a set based on the middle, but you'll see later on we can adjust the offsets and things. So I still want to have the bolts intelligently located. So we have some commands here for putting bolts on a plate. So I'll use that. I want to on that plate, accept. Connecting objects is asked for now, so I want to bolt it to that and that plate, accept. There's 4 bolts in the middle, so let's get this spaced right. 80 each way. It says here based on the intersecting area. So I'm happy with that. Now the bolts themselves I can edit by double clicking on the bolt. So I'd rather they were M16, and I want them to go all the way through. And although it only highlighted 2 of the bolts, it has affected all 4 within that. So that is the joint that I want to create. To be really certain I've got everything, I want to make sure everything is showing, because when you do the create connection template, you must select everything that belongs to that connection template. And I can't really see anything that makes up that cutter object. Might be that joint box there, but I just want to be sure. So I'm going to turn on the features on this beam, because that shorten is part of that cutter object. Okay, so I've got my joint made up, my socket, and I'm going to go to create connection template. So this one's only between 2 beams. Names, I'm going to stick consistent with the advanced steel joints. That would be main beam and secondary beam. So I'm going to call this RHS socket, and I'm going to use the prompts main beam, secondary beam, and I'm going to choose everything there now that belongs to that connection. These buttons here, I just think I ought to mention it. These I never really play with. They seem to detect the correct positioning of the beams to each other. If they're end to end, it should be that one selected. If you're going on to the outside of a flange, it should be that one, but it's nearly always the 3rd one, and it seems to detect that automatically, so you're not likely to have to play with that buttons. So there's my joint box around it. Even though I've already defined it, I could edit what's within that joint box now, and I've realized I forgot to weld anything there. So if I go to these connecting plates here, or these stiffeners, if I go to advanced joint properties, that takes me to the stiffener joint properties, and I can tick that box to create welds. That's what I want to do. And the same on this pair, this side. Create welds. So anything to do with that joint, because it's in there, it's in that joint, adjusting that is fine. That will behave and work on the version when I insert it. So that's another one, built using building bricks, and that'll have a certain degree of adjustment in there as well, which I'll show you in a few moments. And lastly, I'm going to create a 3rd one here. I went to visit a potential customer a few years ago, and they did a lot of bus shelters, cycle sheds, and that sort of thing. And they had a particular connection they wanted on the top of their post here, and I thought that was an ideal example of a custom connection. So I'm going to show you how that might work today. So this rafter needs to overhang. They want a socket on the top here. So to get that rafter to overhang, the first thing I'm going to do is go to the connection vault, plates that beam, and we've got the end plate joint here. And I'm going to choose that rafter. And my layout, I'm going to change that to a value -150. That makes the rafter longer, so that's stretched the rafter for me. Now I need to cut the post off and put another smaller bit of RHS inside as part of the socket. So again, we're going to use an intelligent cut, so that'll be cutter object. Rafter first, then the post. And I'm going to have a 10mm gap on this one. 10, not 1. There you go. Don't need the connection vault anymore. Now, like I say, we're going to put another bit of RHS up the middle of this and bolt through. So to see what I'm doing, I'm going to switch to wireframe. So draw a bit of RHS from that intersection straight down to 60. And that needs to be 120 by 80 by 5, and make sure the positioning is in the center. That fits nicely inside the other one. Need to cut that one off. And this time I'll tick the box to add a weld, so that spigot is welded to the rafter. Okay, pretty good. And then the last thing I need to do is bolt right through the lot. So again, I'm going to go to the building bricks page and choose plates on a beam, bolts on a beam, not bolts on a plate. It's going to be on this beam. I need to make sure I choose the smaller beam because the positioning will be based on the position of that beam, not on the length of the overall column. So that's the positioning I want, and I'll choose the bottom because again that's the end I need to reference for the positioning. Do I want to select connecting objects? Yes, I do. And I select that as my connecting object. And the bolts are going all the way through. So for positioning, I'm going to go for one column of bolts, and they're going to be 60 from the bottom and 80 centers. Now they're not going all the way through, so close that, double click on the bolt, and again I'm making them M16 again, and they can go all the way through. Let's go back to realistic. Yep, that looks good. So now I'm going to make my custom connection, but one thing I wanted to do and emphasize with this joint in particular, this rafter could be any curvature, it could even be straight. So the position of the new members, that little bit of extra beam I drew, will be based upon your first driver in the joint. So if I chose the rafter first when I create the connection, then as the curvature changed, that spigot won't be vertical anymore, it will be following the curvature of the rafter. I need it to stay vertical at all times regardless of what the rafter is doing, so I need to make sure I choose the post first on this occasion, because the post will always be vertical and everything else I add needs to stay vertical, so it will be driven by the post. So I'm going to do connection template. There's two beams involved. The first one must be the post, accept, then the rafter, accept, and name shelter top, post, rafter, and pick the bits. Again, I'm going to go all of that lot, accept, and that should do the job. Okay, so I've got everything, I believe. Now then, to use these joints, I could just go ahead and use them in this project, this model, but I haven't got anywhere to use them in here. When you're creating your custom connections, I highly recommend that you only create them kind of in a separate file. You have one file that's a library of your custom connection definitions, and then you use them in your project. I wouldn't normally define it and use it in the same model. So here I defined it and used it, but you can see there's no discernible difference between the two joint boxes, and that is confusing. You need to be sure you know where the definition is every time, because you need to be able to edit the definition, and you can't use joint copy and things on the definition. So you need to be careful there. In fact, I'll delete that joint over there just so there's no ambiguity. So what might be a good idea, like here, I've kind of copied a small chunk out of my project into my library file, generated the joint I want and created it and defined it there, so that I can now use it in future wherever I want it. So I'm going to save this file. That's obviously going to be a good move. But the real key is, how do I get this now so that I can use it on other projects then? Well, it's dead simple. All you need to do is save this file to the correct path. I'm sure you're all familiar with the location of the data for Advanced Steel. We call it the data folder, and that'll be on your C drive. Program data, not program files. Program data is a hidden folder, so you might need to turn on view hidden files, here file names and hidden items. So see program data, Autodesk, Advanced Steel 2020, or whichever version you're using. And then I'm in UK build, so it's GBR, but whichever one follows your build. Then shared. And then here we go, connection templates. So I've got some other ones in there already, but I need to save this file into that. I'll do save as and go and find that path. C, program data, Autodesk, Advanced Steel 2020, GBR, shared, connection templates, and custom connections webinar. That'll do. My joint library, my timber joints, my post joints. You could have half a dozen files of joints of different categories, but as you wish, however you want to organize it, save it in there. Right, so I'm actually going to close that file down altogether. Now I've finished that definition, and so that I can use it, I'm going to open one I've prepared earlier. that I can use it from or test it with to make sure it's working. So this would be now in my real project. I can now go ahead, I'm modeling away merrily, and I need to use some custom connections. So I've got this hip rafter and I really need to place it. Well, now all I need to do is go to Insert Connection Template. And you can see in this list, it lists every drawing that is in that custom connection templates folder and your current file if it's open. So I've got custom connections webinar there. This current model, user connections test, hasn't got any definitions in there, so it's not listing it. But here's my 3 custom ones. So I'll go to hip bottom, get the preview there. Okay. And when you come to select it, follow the prompt, select. Remember I said it would right select and then whatever. So select right tie beam. You only get 1 click, unlike the connection vault where you can select, and if you get it wrong, you can deselect and choose the right one. You just get 1 click. So you don't miss. Right, left, hip. And there you go. Let's put the whole joint on. And if you like that joint, you can use all the normal tools you can use with any other joint. So you could use joint copy and pick that blue box. And I'm going to go over here, right, left, hip. Now it's really important to notice here that I've deliberately put different size tie beams on. So the right beam there is much deeper than the left, but on this side, of course, it's the other way around. But because I used real joints or programmatic joints on there to do these toe plates, they have self-adjusted to suit those beams. But if I chose it all wrong, it'd all go a bit haywire. For our RHS socket, here's lots of different examples, different size of beams and different orientations. So I'll just do that now here. So it's create connection, no, create. Insert connection template. I'll go for RHS socket. Okay, so I can choose main, secondary. Lovely. And I can do joint copy again if I want to. So main, secondary, main, second, main, second, main, second. How much faster is that than having to draw them all manually and mess about or try and do copy and rotate or anything else? And more importantly, they're all different widths and heights of beam, but you see in every case that's a narrow gap, that's a wider gap, that's a wider gap, that's a huge gap. And the height of it is also adjusting so that it doesn't get too lost. If it doesn't look like it's adjusting, let's have a look. This one is, let's check it, distance. So that beam is 155 by 200. And this plate is 200 square. So you can see it is self-adjusting on the beams. Now, one thing to look out for, if I wanted to adjust this, you don't have the dialog box to say I want to change the bulk spacings like you would have in a normal dialog. But this blue box has this option here, the only option in there really, allow object modification. If I tick that and close it, I can now adjust anything in there exactly the same as I could when it was first modeled. So I could go to these these bolts, right click, joint properties. That is now not the whole custom connection, that is just the building brick. And I could adjust that to be 100 gap that way. And they've changed. Or I could have maybe 3 and make it only a 50 gap. There you go, it's all changing, just like that. So you can still adjust things and do things with it like that, no problem. One other thing I might mention when I'm doing the joint copy, this has other joint boxes within the custom connection. So if I choose that joint box and do the joint copy, I might not get, oh no, see, it's not doing it, it's just copying that plate. It's asking, do I want a reference point? It's not asking for the second beam. So when you do a joint copy on a custom connection, Your safest bet is to make sure you choose the blue joint box as the object copy, and then it works a treat. You can also use joint group on that, just the same as you can with any other joint. But if you do have the definition in the same file, you can't do a joint copy or anything else with the definition in the first place. That won't work. Okay, so the last one I've created was the shelter top. So I've created some more versions here, but you can see they're all different radiuses. So custom connection, insert template, shelter top. Okay, so post first, then rafter. And you can keep going back to this if you want to. It's no problem. Or obviously, like I say, you can do the joint copy. And you'll see here that even though all the roofs rafters have different radiuses, it's worked perfectly on all of them. Quite a steep radius there, still extended it right, still got the post inside of the socket or the plug in the right direction. Now, if you look at these joints, if I wanted to adjust this one, for some reason I wanted to adjust the bolt spacing, well, okay, I'll double click on the bolts, distances, that's all grayed out. Okay, so it was a joint properties, wasn't it? Joint properties, still all grayed out. Okay, well, the reason it's still grayed out is because that custom connection doesn't have allow modification ticked, but you can't see the blue joint box. So when it's a custom connection, you have an extra option on the right click menu, custom connection properties. Now I can say allow modification, and then I could go back and change the bolt properties. So let's make them 40 spacing. There you go. In fact, let's make them 3 of them. Wonderful. So you can still adjust things in there, like I say, like any normal joint, just not all in one clever dialog box, fancy one, but in small pieces. So to summarize that, then we've shown you how to build bits out of standard joints, but still put in a whole new beam in there. So you can use joints from the connection vault. We've built one using lots of building bricks and adding a small amount of variation in there. And then we've covered that on this one. The order you select things is important. Everything's based on the intersection of the 2 beams or 3 beams you're talking about. And the orientation of the first driver is the critical one. One last point on the orientation, it's got nothing to do with the UCS whatsoever. So at no point have I changed either of these files away from being on global or W world coordinates. What it does depend on is that driver beam. So if you have something that ends up on the left of the driver beam, it will always be on the left of the first driver. If you need to put the same thing on the right, well, then you can either say allow modification and do your own rotates or mirrors or whatever you want to do. But I suggest you're likely to want to make a left and a right-handed version of many joints. So if I had things, flags sticking out the left side and the right side, I'd have to make one joint for the left and make a different joint for the right. So you might have a left hand and a right hand version of some of your joints, depending on how it goes. You try one first, and if you find that you can't get it to go on the other side of the post, then you're going to need to create a right-handed version of it. It's not difficult to do, is it? But just give it a shot with the standard single joint first and see if you get away with that. Some of them have enough intelligence. Kind of depends on the circumstances. So they're very, very easy to create. Just save it in one spot, and as if by magic, they become available to every project. And they're very easy to insert and to modify after you've inserted them. So they're very powerful. If you saw my earlier webinar, I used custom connections for connecting the railing onto the concrete stairs using anchors and palm plates of different shapes. So lots of common things could benefit from these custom connections. A lot of companies have their own way of doing certain little things, and again, these would be perfect for that occasion. So that's a summary of their functionality. So let's see if anyone had any questions. Doesn't look like it. I'll remind you again, don't forget to download the handouts if you haven't already done so, because once I log off, they won't be there. Okay, so there's no questions. Anyone want to throw something in quick? Nope. The handouts, if you look on your GoToWebinar, you should have a panel on the right hand side of your screen showing things like whether you mute or unmute and so on. There should be a panel there called handouts. So you should be able to find that and download. Just click on them. I've got a question. You only find these joints when halfway through a large model. How do you get these into your database? Well, what I would do is, if you created one joint manually, like you realize you're in this large model, you've sat there and you've modeled one joint manually, you think, I really need that joint in 14 more places, then I would do a literal straightforward, open a new file, copy and paste via the clipboard. So you copy everything that made up that joint, including the beams that obviously sits on, into that new file, and then put these put that new file in that location, the custom connections folder, and it will be available then to reuse as often as you like. And you can just use that insert like I did. Are these webinars available to download together with the handouts? Well, the handouts there have links to all the previous webinars that I recorded. Today's ones will be added to the list for next time round, but if you want those today's ones, Ask Marketing, one of the emails is on their email address, then you'll be able to download those videos or watch those videos. I'm not 100% sure if the handouts are available on those videos as well. If you don't have the right hand panel, might be shrunk down with an arrow. Have you got a little tiny toolbar on the left or the right? You might need to click on the little arrow at the top there to expand that. People are looking for it. My view is slightly different to your view because I'm the host, so I can't tell exactly. If you still can't get hold of it, email marketing@graitec.com and we'll sort that out. So just to remind everybody that with Advanced Steel, there's really a number of steps to being the most efficient you could ever be. The basic training is obviously only the first step of a journey. It's not the end of your journey. So you learn how to use it, you start on the road of getting going with it. To help you get going more efficiently comes step 2, with the implementation. We do offer implementation days to anyone who wants it. We can set up your prototypes to have your dimension styles and your company logo, your drawing borders, the bills of material to have the information you want. We can do with that initial setup so you hit the ground running with decent efficiency. Then later on, 3-6 months later, maybe a bit more, after you've done a few projects, you might want to think about some more personal tailoring of the system, maybe editing drawing styles or adding custom bolts to the system or new bombs or whatever. We can help you with all of that as well. Further down the line, depending on how you operate, if you're freelance detailers or you have lots of different things you want to do, you might want to be able to customize the system yourself. So we can train you how to do all the customizing yourself. Step 4 there, how to operate the databases, where everything is found, what the little secrets are inside there. We can show you how to do all the customization you would ever want. And later on again, or perhaps around similar time, then you get collaboration with third parties, maybe with different software, and how to also share that system you have on your machine around the company. Large companies like to try and have common databases for people, so we can help you with that on the network and batch files to make sure everyone stays in sync and so on. So there's plenty of things we can help you with. Don't assume that just because you've done your basic training and you've changed a few logos that you're up to date and that's all you ever need. But for now, that's it from this webinar. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found it interesting. There is a small survey when you shut down. It's only 5 questions, and we really appreciate it if you can fill that in for us. It encourages us to do more webinars, and we could do with your ideas of what webinars, what do you want to see, then their maximum benefit. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Bye.